Ryan Nobles is on right now. And good morning, Ryan, from CNN.
Seems like a great conversation to walk into. Good morning, everyone.
So, obviously, we're talking about Yiannopoulos. And what's your I'm bothered that he's saying it's free speech. Because when you get fired from your job or an organization chooses not to have you based on things that have gone public, that's not a free speech issue.
No, Bill, you're 100% right, and the way you described it, leading into me, is right as well. Sorry, my dog barking in the background. I'm really
that's
good at
free speech. Your dog is free speech right there. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, and I think often the definition of free speech is bastardized and by people who don't understand it. And basically what the First Amendment says is that the government can't come in and arrest you for saying something, but that doesn't mean a private organization can't say, you can't come speak at our event, or they can't decide to run your material on their website. That's not what free speech is about. And it's also what I think people confuse free speech is, when you're criticized for what you say, that's also not a violation of your free speech.
Right.
I have every right to criticize what you're saying as much as you have the right to say it.
Oh, by the way, it might be free speech that gives you the right to criticize what I mean. Opinion is not slander, and I think that's really important to note as a part of free speech.
Yeah, and in this country, even libel and slander, the standard of proof in those cases is enormously high. Yeah. The founding fathers did that for a reason.
Well, right. So, Ryan, right now it is.
Well, yeah.
A little nervous about what's going on right now, but I'm pretty sure that that our rights will stand pretty true when it comes to the First Amendment. All right. So, what's your anticipation right now, Ryan, with new immigration regulations were laid out yesterday? It looks like the new executive order, which is going to be really beautiful, is coming out soon. What's your take?
Well, I think that you're going to see this rollout done in much more tight and a much more professional manner than you saw the first time around. It's clear that the Trump administration is hoping to learn from their mistakes from the first rollout. This new immigration executive order that's going to come out having to do with the travel ban is going to be much more meticulously written. It's going to have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted in a fashion that should allow it to stand up in court much better than the first one did. It's still going to cause significant backlash. It's still going to impact potentially millions of people that want to come into the United States.
Yeah.
But it's going to, they're going to have a much easier time, rolling it out and implementing it than they did the first time around, and it should be able to withstand court challenges much better than the first one did. What's interesting, though, is, to a level of hypocrisy with the Trump administration, because they said when they initially put the travel ban in, they had to do it immediately.
Yes.
There couldn't be any grace period because the threat was so incredible.
Well, that was my next question on this topic. We're now going to roll it out slowly, and oh, by the way, it's been, how long has it been? It's been 2 or 3 weeks since the initial, it was supposed to only be a 3-month, the immediacy, that could come into play here.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of flies in the face of what their original reasoning was behind it. But I think what you're seeing here is kind of the cabinet officials that Trump has put into place starting to exert their power a little bit. You could criticize a lot of Trump's decisions and kind of his machinations in office in the early days. But by and large, his cabinet secretaries, particularly the ones that have already been confirmed, are considered to be smart and responsible people, and particularly John Kelly at Homeland Security and Mattis at the Defense Department. These are guys that understand how this stuff works. And I think they kind of said after Steve Miller and Bannon in the White House kind of wrote this executive order without much input from them, they said, listen, we need to be more involved this time around, and we need to do it a bit more responsibly. And you've seen them talk a little bit more in public. They were both overseas over the weekend and into the beginning of this week, where they talked kind of like about the sensible way to institute this. They don't necessarily disagree with Trump's policies, but they clearly feel the way that to enact these policies should be done a little bit more professionally than it was done up until this point.
What's your take on the Rand Paul argument with Senator I must have dementia.
John McCain.
John McCain. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I
This
mean,
little battle back and forth there. What are your thoughts?
well, this is kind of like, you're seeing the different factions of the Republican Party emerge, right? So, and what's interesting about Donald Trump is he kind of straddles both of these spheres. And John McCain comes from that hawkish wing of the Republican Party that is very leery of Russia, believes in kind of a foreign interventionist policy where the United States is the policeman of the world, strong supporter of like our interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan. And Rand Paul is on the other side of that spectrum where he believes we should retreat to and protect our own borders. We should let other countries make their own mistakes. And we shouldn't be heavily investing in our national defense because in many respects, his father, a big proponent of it, believes the military-industrial complex is corrupt. And Trump is somewhere in the middle, right? So he is opposed to kind of this the policeman of the world idea of things, but he's also talking about ramping up military spending again and making the military the greatest and most beautiful in the whole world. So, you've kind of got Paul and McCain on either side of this spectrum, and they're kind of squawking at each other over top of Trump. And there's a lot of things that Trump's doing that Rand Paul doesn't necessarily like, and there's a lot of things that Trump is doing that John McCain doesn't necessarily like. And that's why you're starting to see this all kind of being tossed in the Capitol Hill washing machine. And, the future of the Republican Party is going to basically decide whatever comes out of that.
Yeah. I have a liberal guy that wants this question answered, and see what you think.
Okay.
And that is that imagine you got to rewind here, and let's say Obama is president. There is a Russian jet that has really closely swooped by one of our aircraft carriers. And there's a spy ship, a Russian spy ship off the coast of Connecticut, and Obama's president. Do you think we would be talking about that and how Obama reacts versus the fact that nobody's talking about that right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to compare the Obama administration to the Trump administration just because of the way they conducted themselves. The Obama administration, in many respects, went out of their way not to make news. He rarely spoke in public, and when he did, it was always very measured and very thought out ahead of time. Trump, is shooting from the hip constantly. And so there's so much going on in the Trump administration, it's hard to highlight these other big things that are happening because you've got to focus on these other things. Now, that's not a good excuse necessarily, but I probably agree with your commenter that maybe there should be more focus on some of these things like, Russia's creep into the United States and these different areas. I don't necessarily think they're being ignored, and it's not as though the Trump administration is having an easy go of it so far in terms of the glare of the media spotlight. But there's so much happening right now. I mean, the country's changing, the world is changing. It's not just here in the United States. You have an election coming up in France where there's a hard right candidate similar to the Trump mold that could easily be elected there. So, this is a whole different dynamic than what we saw even 6 months ago.
Does this look like it's a giant pushback to globalism? And it's really a throwback to nationalism, not just in this country, but, in Great Britain and all over.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's 100% what it is. I mean, there's a wide swath of the world that kind of sees the world that they knew in each one of their individual countries slipping away. It's becoming, a far more colorful world. It's becoming a far more diverse world. It's becoming a world with more opportunity for thought and discussion on a variety of different levels, and that makes people uncomfortable. And it's not necessarily positive. It's taking away jobs and it's taking away a way of life in many of these countries, and that makes people nervous. And so you can kind of understand what the root of those concerns come from. The question is, how do you take that next step? How do you, allow for this transition? I mean, you can't avoid the fact that we're more interconnected than we've ever been as a society. Technology has made it impossible to avoid that. So, that's where people are getting nervous. And the problem is, and the concern I think a lot of people has is, how far do you go with that? What steps do you take to try and halt this, progress is really the word, and you can take progress as negative or positive. How do you halt that progress? And that's where there is some concern.
Hey, the last thing is, it has been relatively quiet this week. It's Wednesday, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we really haven't had any big things since Trump tweeted out that the media is the enemy of the American people. It has been quiet. Is that a sign?
Yeah, it was funny when I was thinking of coming on with you this morning. I was looking over stuff. I'm like, I feel like in many respects this is the first deep breath we've been able to take since he was inaugurated.
Yep.
And I think you're right. He had a little bit of choppy water there with the pick of his national security advisor. The selection of H.R. McMaster seems to be universally applauded. People seem to think that this is a guy that can handle this job. He could have gone with John Bolton, which certainly would have been controversial. He decided to go the other way.
And Bolton seems to be, he might be still involved in some way, but in a different capacity, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Not front and center. So, I mean, I got this sense early on that Trump wanted this chaos, that he appreciated this chaos. But I think now, after that big press conference, he's starting to kind of see that it might benefit his administration a little bit to kind of smooth the waters a little bit. That, he's got this, he's got the joint address to Congress coming up. He certainly wants to make a good impression there. There's a lot of big things that are going to happen here. He's going to put out his budget here in the next couple of weeks. So it's not as though they don't have stuff to do.
Yeah.
It might, I can see his White House saying, okay, this is an opportunity now for us that, we've made our mark. Everybody knows we're here. Let's take a step back now and try and figure this out a little bit before we figure out our next big move. But, this Trump White House bill, he's always just one tweet away from a major controversy.
There's no
you can never get too comfortable.
Listen, I had to do my laundry yesterday. My wife doesn't do any of my laundry. I had to do my laundry yesterday, and I started the thing up, and all of a sudden it immediately went to the spin cycle. And I'm like, oh, my God, it's the Trump administration.
You can't get away from it.
It's just unbelievable. Everything is political. All right, Ryan. Ryan Nobles, Washington correspondent with CNN. Good stuff. We enjoy it, and we'll talk again next week.
Bill, I find it hard to believe Allison doesn't do your laundry. I think that's a product of you not knowing how to use that washing machine.
You might be right. We'll just keep that quiet. All right, Ryan, thank you.
Talk to you guys next week.
Ryan Nobles.